Yeah, so title of the presentation, Caveat Emptor. Does the organizational development methodology do what it says on the tin? Motivation. On the tin, so let's look at this tin here. What if the improvement method is you bought just an expensive label on an empty can? That is the worry. And the first point here, over 70% of the organization development initiatives like TQM, BPR, Lean, Six Sigma, etc. fail. So that could seem to point in this direction of what you just said. But on the other hand, failure often, it's also known that failure often stems from organizational context, not methodological flaws. So it is perhaps not so much the what it says on the tin. What is more important is that we need systems-based, practitioner-centered alternatives in order to implement, to make the methods work in consistency with what it says on the tin. And there are solutions for doing this. For instance, critical systems thinking is a very interesting and important solution that has existed for 40 years. It focuses on critical awareness, emancipation, and methodological pluralism. But often, when it does not have to be implemented in a top-down way, but it is often done so, and by, for instance, academic consultants entering some kind of organization, making engagements with top management or to try out this method, and so it depends very much on support you get from the top in such cases, and often that can be difficult, as Sukas points out. However, there are also other ways of it's always possible to do it in a bottom-up manner, which is specifically the case in community operational research (COR), which has been designed particularly for in this participatory, locally grounded manner. But also in this case, it is not. It depends very much on the group one is engaging with. Are these people, do they really understand operational research and systems thinking? Are they willing to fight for what? So it depends very much on culture, regardless of whether we take this managerial approach or the workers approach. As I said in final bullet point here, for both CST and CRR, if organizational hypocrisy makes OD into what Graeber calls a bullshit job, and what he means by that, it is that OD efforts are known to be meaningless, perhaps both by the organization and also by the people who have been assigned for doing OD work, then something new is needed. We need a different approach. And what we suggest here is something we call scientific self-management. This is something we have written about in an early paper, and there's a mix between classical scientific management, Taylor 1911, with self-management science, what Rosenhead wrote about in workers' science or self-management science, Rosenhead 1987, to be bootstrapped in a bottom-up fashion. And the research question is, to what extent can scientific self-management enable meaningful organizational development in complex environments? So, in order to answer, we first need to explain what we mean by scientific self-management. So here we have the classical four principles of scientific management, and we have our interpretation of those on the right. Now, the point here is that we are not making a critique of, there's been lots of critique of Taylorism and things like that, but we are not doing that here. On the contrary, we actually believe that the basic foundation for the principles behind scientific management are quite important and useful. It's only a question of how they should be interpreted, being rather specific on how they've been interpreted. So, for instance, the first one had develop a science for each job. In our case, we interpret that as apply the PDCA, plan, do, check, act for each job. All tasks and tools can be studied and improved scientifically. This is exactly the same thing, just using the language of total quality management. Second one, scientifically select and train workers. Here we interpret that as apply integrated systems pedagogy, which is a method that we have developed and written about in earlier papers, which is the teaching of systems thinking and systems practice in formal education and on-the-job training. Third point on the left, cooperate with workers. We interpret that as apply servant leadership. Turn the organizational pyramid upside down, meet the needs of those doing the work. Fourth, on the left side, divide work and responsibility, and we look at on the right side, interpret the intention of why it's important to divide work and responsibility. It is because we want to divide practice and theory. And there is nothing as practical as a good theory, as Kurt Lewin, father of science action research, used to say. And Kurt Lewin was also not so critical of the scientific aspects of scientific management. There is also here is the key philosophy of scientific self-management. First, Taylor's famous sentence: "In the past, man has been first. In the future, the system must be first." We think that statement makes much sense. Firstly, it's an illustration it shows that Taylorism or scientific management, it could be seen as a systems approach, a very early form of systems approach. And to us, it makes meaning to us if it's interpreted in this specific way that we just have in the concept of servant leadership and what Haslam et al. Call the new psychology of leadership, or self-identity leadership. In the past, the individual has been first. In the future, the group must be first. So that is a theory, and we have studied this through action research. We have done 42 months inside action research in public sector organization. 42 months, that is about 3.5 years. Data sources, field notes, lean forum participation, questionnaire audits. The task was here to implement lean ISO 9000 was the concept. And the analytical approach was iterative plan to check act cycles via the bootstrap algorithm, BA. And which is illustrated in the bottom circle there, plan, do, check, act, the action research cycle with the bootstrap algorithm in the middle. Here we see what the bootstrap algorithm looks like. It's a pseudocode algorithm, first published in 2003 and has been used in many organizations after that. In this particular context, we are using it connects practitioners through small PDCA experiments, builds capability, shared learning, and trust, scales by voluntary engagement, not hierarchical mandate. And here is what it looked like in practice. In this particular case study, the action researchers started out taking on the job of doing internal control and trying to improve that particular process on its own, because in this organization, which was a rather disastrous type of organization, people were put in silos in order to prevent them from discussing with others to have absolute control. So, but and all the other people were realizing that this was really a bullshit society where they were writing documents that nobody read, making diagrams that would never be used, and so on. But so the idea was here for the action researcher to apply action research on himself until he was able to discover at least one other person who also believed in quality improvement and organizational development, which happens to be, in this case, the archive manager. Was not using ISO 9000, but it was using a similar standard, or a related standard, called ISO 3301, which is the quality management, or the management standard for documents and archives and documents. So by combining that with internal control, it's possible to do audits, and also focus those audits on lean. On the lean idea, which was something that the organization was hypocritically committing to, meaning that they said they were doing lean, but in reality they were not. But they had a lean forum, and as we tried to do lean in a real and in a real manner, and presented the results to the lecture to the lean forum, that caught on very well, and people got really interested in seeing actually it was possible to do this, and it resulted, as this spiral grows, to getting more people. The lectures were given repeatedly and different places, and a community of people who at once believed that they were doing bullshit job were starting to get a sense of meaning of what they were doing, and very interested in trying to do good work. And we got some very good results. On the top here we see the audits creating improvement of the management system year by year. And the reason we were getting improvements because we were addressing real problems, like illustrated on the bottom there. We've been discussing teaching how to improve lead time and cycle time at the forum, lean forum. For instance, this is an illustration from the last lecture at the Lean Forum. We're looking at a particular a process where we're measuring this lead time, and contrary to what everybody were believing, the lead time was not improving; it was going up rather than down. So that was very important to share that, and it caused very interesting debate. And the people who were responsible or doing this kind of work got very, very interested and wanted to know how they could what they could do, how to improve to change these trends. However, those people responsible, people in charge, they were not so happy with that. The practitioner gained visibility and formal influence, but it was perceived as a threat to formal hierarchy. So, as illustrated here, talking about knowledge and truth, that was not very popular. And actually what happened was the Action Research Institute was terminated abruptly by senior management as a consequence of that. But so that was not so fortunate, but nevertheless there were lessons to be it was a process that lasted 3.5 years, so from that perspective it was quite successful. And the important thing here was it was to enable self-management, not imposed reforms. And it was starting at the middle of at the center of the spiral, self-management, and try to engage others in self-management. Pair technical improvement with political strategy, and political strategy was to engage more people as this was spiraling out. And then by building ally networks and legitimacy early. So perhaps the spiral could have gone on for several more years if we had been even more successful in building networks and legitimacy early, but we tried as best as we could. So the conclusion: scientific self-management plus bootstrap algorithm provide a replicable mechanism for cultivating learning organizations, if shielded from oppression through alliances and by framing changes as value creation. And so let's return to the tin, rather than believing that, questioning what says on the or what we say here. Failure has often more to do with the hand opening the tin than what is written upon it. So thank you very much.